Awesome to see everybody. I popped into the chat for those who are just joining, recognizing there's a lot going on in the world, in our country, in our personal lives. I'd imagine this week, if you want to drop something in the chat that you're looking forward to in the weekend ahead, just to share a bit of joy, I think that'll be appreciated. Appreciate everyone for coming back today. Nice to see your squares. I was reminded during the week of an ask that was buried amongst a lot of additional information in the onboarding package, which is that we are currently collecting law school policing courses. And I'll drop the link into the chat again, that we're looking to see what courses are currently on offer at each of our member schools related to the law of the police. Dawn, I believe you were initially involved in some of this stock taking last year, but we recognize that courses on offer are constantly evolving, and we want to make sure that we have a current read on what is being offered. So I would ask that you, as representatives of your schools, take a look at this spreadsheet and let me know if we're missing anything. In addition to, as you're comfortable, connecting me with the person responsible for teaching any courses that we may have overlooked. We also want to, and this is something I will be handling, collect the syllabi and course materials for each of those sessions, in the hopes of, at a later date, creating a consortium-specific course on the law of the police, the law of police and society, trying to learn from what is currently on offer to create a hybrid virtual course for consortium member schools. So your help in determining what we're currently missing in this stock take of courses currently on offer would be greatly appreciated. Great. I also wanted to draw your attention once more to the Law of the Police Scholars list, which you may have guessed is also in your onboarding package, but wanted to flag this as a great resource for folks looking for additional information about each of the themes that we'll be discussing in our biweekly sessions. This is not complete. Again, still very much a work in progress. So if there are scholars that you notice that we have not yet captured that you would like to see reflected here, please send them my way and I can work with the lead author on that to ensure that they're incorporated. A reminder to please fill out the state and jurisdiction allocation forms for your data gathering. This helps me to see what jurisdictions are currently being mapped across your research to determine where our gaps might be, as well as in communicating what our current reach is. There's been a great deal of interest and appetite around the work that is being undertaken. And so I want to ensure that I am capturing all of that information as readily as I can. So your help in filling out just that top sheet is really beneficial to me right now. I do want to take a moment, recognizing I've seen so many uploads into our shared Dropbox folder and fielded a few questions from folks around their data gathering to allow this space for any questions that you might have that we can address during our time together.
I have a question regarding what you were just talking about, the jurisdiction sheet. Are you just talking about the very first sheet that pops up, or is there a different document somewhere that I'm missing?
No, you are correct. It is just
Okay.
that top sheet. The
like the first page whenever we go to one of the sheets that we do our name, school, and jurisdiction. Okay.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure there wasn't a sheet somewhere else that I was missing filling out. The only other question I had is whenever I was doing the politicians, it only has it didn't give me an option to add more council members. So should I just, it only lets me add 4 and I have 14 in this city. So should I just like redo another whole sheet and repeat the mayor section?
If you do another sheet and in the mayor section, yes, if you just submit another sheet, that would be great. Unfortunately, you can't add when you're inputting, it's not an option for you to add new sections. So that is the only workaround we have. Thank you for flagging that.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that's how you preferred to handle it. Thank you.
Since there has been so much activity in the Dropbox, I also wanted to ask folks if there's anything that you have learned or seen throughout what you've compiled to date that either surprised you or you thought was interesting. Trust that that will be a question going forward at each of our bi-weekly sessions. So as you're going through that, feel free to jot down anything that's surprised you or you thought might be unique to your area so that we can bring that information to our conversations. Awesome. Well, in putting together our slate of speakers for the time that we will have together, it seemed most logical to me that for our first external speaker, that we would have someone who could speak to us about the point of recruitment. I wanted more information to share with you about how police are hired, what qualities are sought in the new recruits, and what the application process is like. So to answer some of those questions, we are joined today by Major Shannon Halstead of the St. Petersburg Police Department in Florida. Major Halstead, thank you so much for joining us today, and I yield the floor to you.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me. Happy Friday, everyone. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but it only has 15 or so slides. I know that Jessalyn was kind enough to send my bio, so I am not going to waste time talking about myself. I really just want to get into the content of what I think that you're interested in, and then I'm going to leave plenty of time for any questions at the end. So I am going to share my screen with all of you now. And almost there, stand by. All right, just to verify, you can see a picture of our brand new beautiful building, right?
We can, I think you want to switch the display settings though.
Okay. Display settings, swap presenter.
Perfect.
Did that take care of it?
It did.
Okay, perfect. So let me go to the next slide there. All right, the first thing I wanted to say is just to share with the group. I knew that Chief Holloway had done work with the American Bar Association, specifically to body-worn cameras and to different initiatives within the criminal justice committees. But I simply got an email that was like, hey, tell this group about recruitment. Jessalyn was kind enough to share with me yesterday when we did a walkthrough what she thought that the group would be interested in. And then, like a good detective, I decided, man, I need to learn more about the consortium and what the group is doing. And I can't tell you, I went last night and I listened to the podcast introducing the Legal Education Police Practices Consortium. And I really just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I know that I'm blessed to be at a law enforcement agency that have women in executive positions, but there are women in law enforcement agencies all across the country that are still fighting to get a seat at the executive table. So I really am just so appreciative of the opportunity to share with you the information about what our organization is doing, and then to answer any questions for you. So our police department, I do think that we're both progressive and innovative. We're here in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's right next to Tampa in the Tampa Bay area, home of the Tampa Bay Rays, the Rowdies, if that rings a bell to anyone. Our authorized sworn strength is 600. That's significant because it just went up by 25 officers this past October. So we hired 55 officers last year, and we're looking to hire at least 55, if not 65 more this year. We have 317 civilian employees. The budget is 119 million. And then the population, 265,000. I've been here at the agency since 2000, and I would say our population steadily increases, and everyone comes from up north and tells us about how awesome the weather is. So our chief is Anthony Holloway, been here 8 years now, not just because he promoted me, but I will say that I don't think that people within the organization realized how stale and stagnant we were as an organization until we had a change in leadership at the top. And I think he is the catalyst that really drove people to be progressive and innovative in what we were doing with policing here in St. Pete and how important the community engagement is. This next slide is a updated recruitment video. It's just over a minute, so it's not long, but it was updated and released last year. And my hopes are that by watching the video, you can really see the type of officer that we're trying to attract to our agency. So I'm just going to let it play, and then we'll talk about it at the end, but it's not very long.
This is the St. Petersburg Police Department.
We serve nearly 300,000 people.
We are a diverse police department, working in a building that is espectacular.
With state-of-the-art equipment and technology.
And modern training in our own shooting range.
Fitness is a top priority.
Always enhancing the tools of our trade and our skills. So we can make a positive difference in our community.
And solve crime to keep our citizens safe.
And build better relationships with the community.
We proudly serve with loyalty, integrity, and honor.
All kinds of career opportunities.
So come work in paradise.
So that's our new recruitment video, and we were really intentional about who we used in the video and what we wanted the message of the video to be. I hope that when you see it, that you can tell that we're trying to attract diverse, community-oriented, and dedicated officers to our agency. An interesting statistic is that in the state of Florida, 40% of those officers that I'm hiring today will move on to a different career field within 5 years. And that's really significant because I think, 20, 25 years ago, once someone entered the field of law enforcement or corrections, any public safety, probation, anything like that, really people would stay the whole 20, 25 years in order to earn that pension. It's just, I'm sure as all of you already know, a different generation now, and we really do have to work hard as an organization to provide all sorts of continuing education and professional growth and development opportunities in order to keep all of our folks here. So I'm going to keep going. Recruitment, the main topic that we're talking about today. We can go into more of these in detail during the questions periods if you want to, but career expos, both in person and online. The whole COVID thing was interesting. Our applications definitely went down during that time period, but with the video, we had a huge increase, 165% increase in the number of applications that came into our agency last year. And that video, I think we spent $500 to boost it on Facebook, and it ended up being viewed over 25,000 times. So we definitely used our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Police One, all sorts of different resources to really push out the video, some brochures, redid the marketing on all of the business cards and posters, and it really gave us a new forward-facing marketing scheme, I would say, for the organization. But the visits to the criminal justice program, I wanted to say on that, there's actually 43 different training centers that teach criminal justice programs in the state of Florida. And they are all under the umbrella of an organization through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement called the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. And that group of people meet quarterly, 4 times a year. And at those meetings, the 43 training directors are also there. So we really established a lot of relationships with all of those training directors to go out to their criminal justice programs and to recruit cadets in their academies and to bring them to St. Pete and to show them what St. Pete has to offer. I'm going to leave those for now, and then if we want to talk more about them later, we can. Everyone always asks me, what's our magic solution or answer for diversity recruitment? And my answer is us. You saw Chief Holloway's picture. This is the rest of our command staff. The upper left-hand corner are the 3 assistant chiefs, and then all of the rest of us are majors within the organization. And what I said to Jesselyn yesterday when we were talking about diversity is that when you have diversity, it's easier to recruit diversity. And then the other part of that is it has to be a diversity at every level of the organization. Officers, sergeants, lieutenants, majors, chiefs, all the way up, so that no matter who's coming in the door on day one, they can look at the executive team in place and say, man, that could be me one day. So yes, do we go to historically Black colleges and university? Yes, we do flyers. We put ads in all sorts of different journals and magazines to get the word out that we're hiring. But I truly believe that because we're diverse, that helps us recruit diverse candidates. Minimum requirements, there's going to be 2 slides here. I would say pretty typical. I know that you guys are from all across the nation, so it definitely changes from state to state. But there was 2 different things that I wanted to bring to your attention. The first one is the blue arrow there that says no illegal use of controlled substances in the past 3 years, and then no marijuana within the past 12 months. That's actually been revised in the last year. Our controlled substances policy was previously 5 years, and the marijuana was 3 years. We were eliminating candidates that we felt like had turned their lives around or made better decisions, and we were eliminating people that we didn't want to eliminate in our candidate pool. So we made that decision last year, and that's one of the ways I think that our applications went up. And then the other one is the second blue arrow here, and it's tattoos. We previously to this policy had a really, really strict tattoo policy that didn't allow for any visible tattoos at all. In the new policy, you can have tattoos, they just can't be on your hands, face, neck, scalp, or scalp. And we can, if you have more questions on those, we can come back to those later too. Jesselyn, I just wanted to take a break. I can't see the chat screen, so if there are any chats in there, we'll handle them at the end.
There's nothing right now. I think you're all good to roll on.
Okay, thank you. So our hiring and selection process, man, 10 steps. So before it took about 6 months, between 6 and 8 months to process an applicant. And now really my goal is really 3-4 months tops. When I first came to this position in September of 2020, and the application process was still a really thick packet of outdated hard copy HR forms that needed all sorts of signatures and notary stamps, etc. And we have taken that process and made it totally electronic, where once they apply with the city, they get a link to a software that we use, and they literally do everything online after that. They complete a personal history questionnaire, go through the interview with a background investigator. The next part of the process that I wanted to skip to, which I think makes us different compared to other agencies I know in the Tampa Bay area, is the administrative interview. The administrative interview normally has 3 or 4 supervisors from throughout the department on the interview. But the thing that makes us different is that we always have a civilian panel member on the interview panel. And I think as a city, as a police department and as a city, the last few years, the buzzword has always been like transparency. But having the civilian or the citizen on the interview panel really allows us to open up and show them the process of what someone goes through in order to become an officer with our agency. And when I do the training, when I sit with them, I tell them that basically what they're judging is if they were having an emergency, would they want this person to respond and handle it? And of course, they take into account that we get people that literally have no life experience all the way up through officers that have worked at other agencies, you know, for several years and are coming here to Florida. But that administrative interview, what we're measuring, what we're watching for in that interview is the command bearing, their posture, their ability to communicate, and their ability to answer questions. And it's really interesting to see the candidate's response when they realize that there's a civilian panel member on there and that they're actively asking questions, just like the rest of the panel. So that's definitely been a neat addition. The physical abilities test I'll talk about on there just for a second. We had or have a physical abilities test that we saw a high percentage of applicants passing. But then when they went to go to the police academy, there was a different fitness standard, a Cooper fitness standard, and we weren't putting our best candidate or foot forward at the academy, so they would pass one and then fail the other. So really, in January of 2021, we established an agency-wide fitness requirement, and we grandfathered everyone in that was already within the organization, but everyone coming in, instead of having healthy cops just for the first 5 years of their career, we really emphasize that we want healthy cops for 25 years, not just for the first 5. So that's really been another change. It's a little change now, but I think as the organization continues to grow, that with officer wellness in mind, that will be good for us in the long run. Just some of the benefits, the tuition assistance, I would say probably 25 to 30 officers a year use some trust money from a Patterson Trust Fund, which was a resident here in the city who was really invested in public safety and wanted public safety personnel to have opportunities to continue their educations. So people can work on their associates, bachelor's, or master's, and there's funds for that. You can see the other education incentives. Those come from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. People always ask questions about salary, so I thought I would put the salary chart there in case anyone was interested in seeing that. The specialty units, that's another area that I feel like really draws people to the St. Petersburg Police Department from all over the United States. I think that we have more opportunities to diversify your skill set within the organization. Everyone that comes in starts in the patrol division answering 911 calls for service, but really there's a lot of growth and movement after that, which is what I feel like young people are looking for in the workplace. They don't want to just come to work and leave. They want to feel like they're making a difference and really figure out what their niche is. So I think that's helped make us successful as well. I put that slide in there just because there are a lot of people coming from out of state, and those are the incentives that we offer as an agency to draw them here. There's also been a lot of media lately about our governor offering an additional bonus for law enforcement officers coming from out of state. That's still in the legislative session right now. Nothing's nailed down on that I know of, but certainly helped with the increase of applications. Field training program. I know that's not really along the lines of recruiting, and I know that's your next topic that you're going to talk about with your next guest speaker, so I'll leave that one alone, but just thought I would throw that one in. And then the last, what I would call progressive and innovative thing that I think in the last year has really drawn people to the St. Petersburg Police Department is this idea of our call team, the Community Assistance and Life Liaison. Like many departments across the nation, police are wearing many hats and called to do all sorts of things that aren't necessarily police related sometimes. So we were never in a situation where in the last few years, people are like, defund the police. We moved resources that we had within the department to this program. And I think once the officers saw the impact the program was making, there was buy-in right away, because it really was reducing some of the police calls for service to people who are, repeat callers, because basically we just weren't able to meet their needs. So I think this program has, and I've seen other agencies across the country now that are either starting to duplicate it or having, their own version of the program. All right, well, I feel like I'm rambling, but I really just want to answer your questions, and I can go back in depth with any questions that you may have.
Major Halstead, thank you so much for that. It was an excellent overview. I am seeing a few questions in the chat. I don't know if I welcome folks to read it themselves. Since there's only two here, I'll read the first two and then prompt people to speak from their own voice.
Okay.
So the first question we have here is in reference to your slide about officer wellness and curiosity if that includes only physical health or mental and emotional health as well.
Thank you. Awesome question. I can definitely go in more into detail on that. So, and Jesselyn and I were talking about this yesterday too. I think if you would have asked 10, 15, 20 years ago, really people didn't talk about officer wellness. And that's another topic in the last 3 or 4 years that certainly has gotten more discussion, which means more resources. We now currently as an agency have an in-house psychologist, EAP staff, where before I think we just contracted out to whoever the city insurance was through. So the relationship, knowing that it's the same doctor and the relationship that she's built and the reputation that she's built amongst the troops, if you will, have really increased the number of people who will use that program. I feel like before there was a bad stigma attached with using that program, where now it's totally off-site and people are able to access in a way that they feel like the confidentiality will be kept and then they can get the services that they need. She started off in a practice by herself, and since then has added another psychologist, a social worker, and like a licensed mental health counselor. So props to the agency for realizing that that was a need and then working to make it happen. The crisis intervention team, there's a lot of officers that are trained for CIT, and then there's also CISM, which is critical incident stress management. So definitely a lot of programs in place now to address both mental health related issues as well as physical health related issues.
Awesome. Major, I wonder if I could ask you to stop sharing your screen just so we can see all of the squares of folks in attendance. Thank you. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Okay. Next, I've got a question here about the specialty unit, police assisting the homeless, what that entails.
Sure. That's it was the kind of the precursor to the call team. St. Pete had a significant transient homeless population where, again, they were not getting their needs met. I was trying to think of some of the different community groups that police assisting the homeless. It was a Turning Point, which is one of our substance abuse clinics, PEMS, which is a mental health organization within the county. but it was the same clients over and over again, and then they were Band-Aid fixes instead of long-term fixes. So PATH was the unit that came along before the call team that really identified the vulnerable population and tried to get them services.
Dawn, since that was your question, did you have any follow-ups or?
No, that answered it. Thank you so much.
Great. And then Jordan, I'm getting tired of my own voice. Can I ask you to ask your question?
Sure thing. I was just going to ask you about the call program you have, and ask if it's dispatched through 911, and if so, how does dispatch determine which calls are handled by call and which ones require a police response?
Yeah, another great question, because there was a lot of trial and error in the beginning. When they first rolled out the program, they actually had officers go with the navigators, and the navigators are the call team members that go out into the field to handle the calls for service. So they started with officers, and then as the program grew and the navigators felt more comfortable with the type of calls that they were handling, then the officers no longer went with them. Now, if they need an officer to go with them, they can request an officer and one will be provided. There's Comm Center and the team work together to identify a whole list of call types of what they should respond to and what they shouldn't respond to. And I'm sure, the original intent was, all the not all of the nonviolent calls, but some of the nonviolent calls, when in reality, a disorderly intox or a transient or someone panhandling can turn violent. So our training division actually held training with the call team navigators for them just to do like some basic officer safety, for them to recognize when someone was escalating, when to engage with someone and when not to. But really, it's been very successful. And if the navigators feel like they need an officer to go with them, they will reach out to Comm Center and ask for someone.
Hannah, you had the same question that I did. Can I ask you to?
Yeah, I've never heard of a police force using a civilian on the interview process, and I think it's a great idea. And I was just wondering how you guys came up with that idea, a little bit more into that, and then also how you guys select who's gonna serve. Like, is there a committee, or is it like an election process or something like that?
Great question. When we originally started it, we have an in-house, trying to think of his title. I think it's community, it's not community affairs, maybe it's community mentor. We have a person in-house whose job is specifically to have a relationship with all of the different clergy in St. Pete. So the first group of people that we used for the civilian parent members were different clergy volunteers. And then after we used everyone on that list, I had previously participated in a leadership program through our Chamber of Commerce back in 2012. I'm sure many of you are familiar with different Chamber of Commerce leadership programs, but it's such an awesome program because it brings people from all different sectors that you wouldn't normally get a chance to meet. And that organization is really strong here in St. Pete. And I just put the call out to the Leadership St. Pete Alumni Association and said, hey, this is what we're doing. We want our process to be transparent. If you want to sit on the interview panel, please submit. And I had probably 20 names that replied back who were interested to sit on the panel. So it's, I don't want to say very informal, but it's not a huge time commitment because a lot of the people, the clergy and the Leadership St. Pete folks, I knew would be willing to volunteer for an hour or 2 or 3, but I didn't want them to feel like they were on a grand jury commitment where they were going to have to be committed for 3 months at a time. So we've made it through the list once in the last year, and we have some people that are like, hey, call me again, I want to do it again. And now the word is out, both with the leadership group and with the clergy, that it's kind of a cool thing to sit and do the interview panel. So I think people are really kind of invested in the process now, and they're excited to see the people that are applying to the agency, and it makes them feel like they have a voice in the process. So it's really been a neat experience.
That's great. Jesse, I see your hand raised, and I think you just put something in the chat, but I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions, but I'm not sure if you have time to answer both of them, but I'll ask the first one, which is a little bit of a riff off of what Jordan said. So I was curious, as far as the call personnel, are they employed by the department? And if they are, what's their position if it's not a peace officer?
They are not employed by the department. They are employed by Gulf Coast Jewish Family Services, which was a, I believe at the time that the RFP, the request for proposals went out, there was two or three different social service agencies within the Tampa Bay area that were able to meet the requirements of what the department was looking for. And it was a collaboration. There was a lot of like hands-on hand-holding in the beginning as the program was getting up and running. And now we have one liaison. Well, I shouldn't say one. There's one main liaison, and then the sergeant of the PATH team still stays collaborating with the navigators, but they all work for that social service agency. And that's a good question, because at first, I think when we onboarded the original group of navigators, some of them were like, this is amazing, it's awesome, it's what we've been looking for. And then others were like, no, this is not for me. So there was some turnover in the beginning, but now the group that's been in place there is really successful, and it seems like a cohesive team that are making great strides in what some of their strategy was. They took those callers or those citizens that had the highest call volume, the highest utilizers of services, whether it was 911 calls or visits to the emergency room, visits to jail. And then they really focused a lot of their energy and resources on impacting those people at the top of the list. So I don't have any recent stats for that, but if it's something that you're particularly interested in, I could definitely connect you with the coordinator of that program here at the department. And what was the second? Did I answer the second?
Oh yeah, the second was, thank you for that, the first question, the answer to the first question. The second one was regarding recruitment. And I found your drug policy interesting, because you look at like LAPD drug policy, it's just like no prior drug use, like hard drug use, period, right? And you look and see that in other like requirements on other police websites. So it's interesting that you said that you guys give chances to people who have changed their lives. That's kind of a little bit of a broad spectrum. So does that include like prior criminal history? Like they've been to, prison or jail, or is it just like undisclosed drug use?
No, definitely still no felony convictions. It's funny, the word experimental is in the policy, and we've had many in-house debates about what the word experimental means, because that could be 3 or that could be 3,000. Like, what does experimental really mean? And then the other part of that, I know I'm like going outside of the organization, but it's just a recent experience that I had, is I spent last week at one of the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission meetings. And one of the things that they do there also is all of the officer discipline for certificates when people are involved in activities that they should be involved in. And they were having a huge debate because their penalty task force guidelines in reference to marijuana is still revocation right now. So if you're a police officer and you have a random drug test and you test positive for marijuana, their penalty task force chart says revocation, which really according to our hiring guidelines, if you haven't done marijuana within the last 12 months, you can get hired. So you can get hired, but then you're going to get, your certificate revocated. So I think it's that interesting time all across the country where people are really trying to figure out what all of the policies related to marijuana are and how we're going to update those moving forward.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think I've been tracking this correctly. I think it's Spring, then Alicia, then Hope. So Spring.
Thank you for being here today. My question is, you guys sit at 600 sworn. Are you currently at 600? And if not, how far behind are you? And is that normal? Or do you find that you're lower than what you usually sit at?
Man, we are at like 561, 562. So I bet, unfortunately, the assistant chief that I work for, I bet him a steak dinner last year that I was gonna get us up to full capacity. And needless to say, I had to take him out to dinner. We are such a young organization. And I think, again, that's something that a lot of other departments across the United States are facing, we just have a lot more people that are leaving earlier and not staying there full. We can stay the 25 years and then they can drop for 7 additional years. And we just have people that were leaving early and I couldn't hire them quick enough for the amount of people leaving.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia?
I have 2 questions. My first one's a follow-up from the previous question on mental health and mental wellness for the officers. And I may have missed it because I had my 2-year-old crawling on me during that part of that time. But my follow-up is, I know you have the resources available for officers if and when they need it, but do you have any mandatory times where they need to go, such as I'm prior federal law enforcement and I worked crimes against children, and then I was a supervisor for internet crimes against children. And we had all the resources available, but it was never required. But as a supervisor, I made my own policy of requiring whenever they did certain operations, hey, I need to go check in with our docs and just get cleared, and then before you go back out, whenever they would experience certain things. So is there anything in the department where it's a requirement whenever they're doing certain operations, certain types of work, or if there's any certain involvement in the community that they should maybe be seen by a doc for? Is there any mandatories?
Yeah, I would have to check the policy. I know the critical incident stress management CISM team does, if there's, I think what you're referencing is any of like a high profile or, a major case event, there is definitely a debriefing that they are required to attend, where peer support and some of the CISM team members are present at that debriefing. So I know that their attendance is required there, or same thing with crimes against children, if it was like a particularly heinous case, or our digital forensics unit is working, child pornography cases. So I know for a fact, do have some mandatory evaluations that they undergo, I want to say annually for that specific specialized unit. But as far as the others, the debriefing is mandatory. But as far as the follow-up services with actually seeing Dr. Benson, our EAP, I don't think there's any mandatory requirement for that piece of it.
Thank you. And then my second question is in recruitment, and I apologize, it probably will not be worded or articulated the best. But I love everything you said about recruiting diversity, and I completely agree, like having diverse from the top down really matters. And I was just wondering, because just from my personal experience, whenever I saw my previous agency's recruitment video from over 10 years ago, I was like, oh, wow, they're recruiting people who want to only knock in doors, and that's not the majority of our job. So, and I always felt like I saw a lot of maybe recruiting the wrong type of people based on the recruitment tools. So with the new focus that you have you seen any kind of change in the type of applicant? I know that's probably a very difficult question to answer, but have you seen any changes regarding the type of applicant? And again, I know that's a really hard question to answer.
No, I like the question. Every recruit class is different. I fully appreciate what you're saying about that it's important to get all different types of applicants. We can't just hire 15 SWAT guys at a time. We have tons and tons of EOTs, which stands for equivalency of training, coming to Florida right now. And those are really appealing to the chiefs, especially the chief in uniformed services, the patrol division, who wants to get bodies on the street as quick as he possibly can because of the training turnaround. They move here from out of state. They do a 7-day equivalency training at our local academy. They take the state exam. They do a post academy that runs probably 2 or 3 weeks, and then they're on the street. Where if it's someone that's coming right out of college, by the time we get them through the academy, when I went to the academy, I want to say it was only like 600 hours, where now it's up to like 790 hours. So months from the time we actually hire them, get them through pre-academy. We normally do a 3-week pre-academy to share with them what the culture of our organization is, what the expectations are. They leave to go to the academy, 5-6 months, whatever that is. And then come back for another 3-week post-academy where we do all of the high liability training areas, driving, shooting, defensive tactics, everything like that in-house again, so that we re-emphasize to them, okay, you went to the academy, you learned the state curriculum, this is how we do it at St. Pete. So I would say that, yes, I feel like I'm thinking of a class of 13 that I have in the academy right now. And it really is an awesome mix of men and women in that class. And to your point, though, I can see, okay, that guy wants to be a canine guy. That lady wants to be crimes against children. There really is, we have a digital forensics unit that's new within the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't want to call anyone a computer geek, but we have some people that are like coming on that are like specifically interested in working in digital forensics. That is typically a different person than the SWAT guy that wants to execute warrants and kick in doors, which we're not doing nearly as often now as we did, 15 years ago when I was a vice narcotics detective, unless it's a high priority, very, very violent felon. It's just not happening like it was before. And I think that's best for everybody involved.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hope, thank you for your patience. Sorry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my question had to do with the I guess educational and age requirements. I believe on the slide, if I'm remembering correctly, it said the minimum age was 19. And I was just curious about like your personal thoughts or the department's thoughts on like some of the shift, especially probably the last like decade or so of departments like raising the age requirement to 21 or requiring like a bachelor's degree. Because I know that there have like more recently been some studies that like uses of force tend to go down with like the increase in education, but also, it seems like you're trying to like sort of expand the pool instead of decrease it. And so I guess that would sort of go against that interest. So yeah, I was just curious about like your thoughts on that.
Sure. We, as part of the application process on there, it said, I think I called it psychological and vocational testing. That's one of those areas that I really rely heavily on Dr. Stephen O'Neill, who is our psychologist that does that testing. And him and I have had conversations because he will rate each of the candidates on a scale of 1 to 5. And then he also does all sorts of other testing with them. But he actually, in the reports that he provides to me, will talk about their level of maturity. And we literally within the last week had a candidate that everyone loved, did really good in the administrative interview, the polygraph interview, the physical agilities test. And when I got the report back from Dr. O'Neill, he didn't recommend him. And I was like, man, what happened? And it was maturity. He's it was a 20-year-old man, And I feel like he had some college credit, but he didn't have the associates. It was one of the ones I think where he had the 30 credit hours. And then by the time we sent him to the academy, he was going to have the other 30 hours. But with a candidate like that, who, when we're taking a totality of the circumstances that we think will be good, but just not right now, sometimes we'll reach out to them and be like, you know, let's wait 6 months, let's wait a year, and we'll revisit and kind of hold on to them, because obviously we feel like he has potential to be a really good candidate, but at the same time, to your point, we want to make sure that he has enough life decisions to not get a gun and a badge and go on the street and make bad spontaneous decisions. So it really is a balancing act of looking at their hiring file all together and really taking into account all the different pieces of the file, because they do check with the neighbors, they check with family members, previous employees, basically anyone that they can find. The background investigators do a full social media search, which is absolutely amazing, the stuff that they find on social media. I'm like, if you're applying to be a police officer, you'd think that you would take some of that stuff off of social media. But I guess some of it, once it's there, it's there. But yes, it's interesting in the classes, even that class of 13, again, that I was referencing earlier, there's some people with very little life experience in there, all the way up through some guys who left the military as like a senior firearms instructor who's like really squared away, and he keeps the rest of the group in line. So it's fascinating to watch them when they first come in. It's just, the 13 of them sitting there, no one really knows what's going on. And then as that team or as that group develops, you see all the different strengths and weaknesses of the different personalities that kind of, mold and gel together as they move through the training process and eventually hit the street. It's pretty neat to watch.
Karen. I'm not getting any audio from you. Okay, I don't know why I muted myself while she troubleshoots. Major, I have a question. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to steal some moderator's privilege. I'm curious if you can talk to us a little bit more about interagency transfers and the type of information you might be looking for in the background of officers transferring from an existing agency into yours.
Sure, definitely an important issue because, like I said earlier, I think a lot of people are coming to the organization because of all of the different opportunities within. And that's hard because what we make sure to tell them in Post Academy is you are going to be able to do those things, but you have to do your time on the street first. Typically, probably I would say 3 years in the past, the field training program was kind of a stepping stone to all of those different specialized opportunities because we felt like if you're helping the organization in the field training program, by training those that are coming behind you, if you can supervise one person, then you can, of course, help and be a team member on some of those other different specialized teams. But there's also tons of training. I would say that's the other thing. When Holloway came to the agency years ago, he really advocated for additional funding and for continuing education and training. So if someone decides like, I'm going to be a homicide detective, they don't just get to be a homicide detective the next day. They really typically normally start in the crimes against property division. They learn to be a burglary detective, what it means to have a caseload. How do I go to court and testify? What do I say on the stand? What do I never say on the stand? How do I properly prepare for a deposition? So there's, report writing classes, interview and interrogation, kinesics. There's all sorts of trainings that are either offered in-house by our training division or in collaboration with our local community college and Region 9 task force, which is a task force that gets money from the state in order to provide officer training. So depending on the track that they're interested in, if it's K9, they have to go to K9 school. If it's SWAT, they go to SWAT school. There's all sorts of different, school school resource officers. We'll have a school resource officer school, but they also, in addition to that, everyone takes the crisis intervention training to help identify persons that are having mental health crises, but the SROs go to one that's specifically geared towards officers in the schools so that they can have the skills that they need to troubleshoot anything with kids and working with the staffs at the school too. So definitely lots of opportunities. The challenging thing is sometimes when the young officers get in, they want to do all of that within their first 3 years. And we just have to, as managers and police leaders within the agency, recognize when it's getting stale and stagnant. And then I think that's on us to help people develop by moving people different places, even though sometimes they don't necessarily want to go.
That's super useful. I guess I'm curious a bit more, like if I, in an alternate universe, if I was an existing DC Metropolitan Police Department officer for the last 10 years, and I decided to transfer to the St. Petersburg Police Department, would you be looking at that full 10-year span, and who within my existing department would you be in contact with to determine if I was the right fit to transfer to your organization?
Sure. A lot of that happens during the background investigation process. But whenever it's a pre-certified officer, they will check. I should know the name of the database and I don't, but I know that there's a national database now that has officer discipline in it. And they will make contact with either the Office of Internal Affairs, or ours is called the Office of Professional Standards. And they will also get the last employee performance evaluations and speak with the supervisor and references as part of the references check. That's happening a lot here in St. Pete. I can think of, 4 or 5 in the last few classes that had over 10 years law enforcement experience from their previous agency where they're coming here to St. Pete. As far as pay, we will give them like a lateral incentive, but only up to step 5 on our pay scale. So that person that has been there 10 years, 16 years, 18 years, the highest they can come in at as a step 5. But I'm thinking of a specific woman in our homicide division who came from the Richmond, Virginia Police Department. And I was the supervisor in charge of our homicide unit when she first came to the agency. And she was standing by with a suspect that needed to be interviewed. And I just happened to start talking with her. And then she shared with me that she had worked in homicide at Richmond, Virginia Police Department. And long story short, she really progressed quickly because we knew the skill set and experience that she had at her prior agency. So of course we have to balance that with the people here at our agency that have been working to get that same spot. But I think when we get someone like that, that's a wealth of knowledge or experience from somewhere else, we do the best we can to either strategically place them on a young squad where we know that they're going to be of benefit to everyone else around them, or to help them reach their professional development goals, just like we would anyone else, but definitely value the prior experience. But we always joke in the hiring panel that we want to hire best of the best. Years ago, when I came on, I was hired off paper. I never saw anyone in person. I submitted all my paperwork downtown at the time where there was a background investigator, but no one had seen me in person until I showed up to go to the police academy. So we are very intentional about not hiring someone else's problems. We have the luxury right now of having more candidates in our process than what we can process at one time. So we, of course, triage and try to find the best of the best. But I just want to make sure that I don't hire someone that's just bouncing from agency to agency, looking for a new home. We always tell people in the interview process, we don't want them to be a flight risk. We want them to put down roots and be a part of our community.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you for that information. Just recognizing we're almost at time, but I think we have 2 questions here that I think might be quickly answered. So first, the size of the population that your department serves?
265,000.
And then the Eric, are you comfortable with me reading that? I yield the floor to you if you want to jump on.
Either way, I was wondering, as far as your in-service goes, what are your continuing ed hours? And is your in-service training broke up by the officers and individual assignments, or is it generic, or a little bit of both?
It's a hodgepodge mix of everything. The last few years, a lot of our accreditation requirements, we are both, we have a state CFA accreditation and the national CALIA accreditation. So there are some of those that we will push out like on a video survey system, but we do tons of in-service also, depending on staffing. Sometimes, like again, the uniform services chief is like, stop scheduling training, people have to work. But the other chiefs know that they appreciate all the extra training. So it's fine, it all works out. But the firearms training once a year, taser, de-escalation, anyone involved in a cruiser crash goes to remedial driving school. I would say there's a hodgepodge, a good mix of both videos, in person, virtual, all sorts.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for all of the group for the great questions that you've brought to this conversation. One thing I've heard from informal conversations with each of you is potentially the start of some frustration that you've not found some of this information from your local departments. So what I was hoping from today is that we would get an understanding of what policing looks like, at least in the community of St. Petersburg, and to get a feel for how transparent they have approached this conversation, as well as the wealth of expertise and comfort around discussing some of the more challenging components in this conversation. So Major Halstead, thank you so much for joining us today and for allowing us to interrogate you. I'm sure that's not something that has happened in a bit, so thank you for that.
No problem. Thank you so much. And I'm sure she has my contact information, but if anyone wants any additional information, please just shoot me an email and I'll get back to you.
Fantastic. Great. Well, that is everything for today. I will send the recording to the group shortly, along with some additional readings and notes for the week ahead. But thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great, safe, joyous weekend.